Welcome back, everyone. All our listeners in the USA, the UK, Australia, India, Canada, Bulgaria, and of course, all the things in space and all the ships at sea. We appreciate all of you and certainly hope you're enjoying everything so far here on the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour. Now, in this episode, we're going all the way back to 1943, to RKO Studios, the fall of the studio system, and the rise of Val Lewton, who, despite his relatively short career, really became one of the most influential producers in movie history, certainly in the world of horror movies. It's I Walked with a Zombie. Nathan and Katie are here to explore this shadowy realm. But first, we've made a few upgrades to the studio, added some shiny new gear. Famous actor Tom Conway. What do you think?
It's not beautiful. Everything seems beautiful because you don't understand. Those flying fish, they're not leaping for joy. They're jumping in terror. That luminous water, it takes its gleam from millions of tiny dead bodies, the glitter of putrescence. There's no beauty here, only death and decay.
Pink Lady and Jeff.
Abysmal point of television. Okay.
It's just called Pink Lady.
You're just being
No,
mean.
it's Pink Lady and Jeff.
Oh.
Can't forget Jeff.
Jeff
That's
Altman.
Yep.
No, that's Jazzy Jeff after Will Smith kicked
Well,
him
that's
out.
when they rebooted it.
No,
When
it's
when
not
Will
it.
Smith went to do Fresh Prince, DJ Jazzy Jeff is like, well, what do I do? And they're like, well, we have a great idea. We're going
don't
to
care.
reboot an old property called Pink Lady and Jeff. And it's going to be Pink Lady and DJ Jazzy Jeff.
What the fuck?
And he was like, I'm in. And it's going to be a variety show. We'll get some guest appearances like Harvey Korman, somebody like that. You're going to love yourself on this show.
Popular Japanese musical
Corman's dead,
duo.
but we don't think it's going to be a problem.
This is weird.
Yeah, that's what everyone said.
Oh, Debbie Harry.
And then they changed the channel. Yeah. Oh, the guests were
Amazing.
weren't the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
The guests weren't the problem.
The format was like, what are we doing here? Like, seriously. We've got this Japanese duo who are amazing, right? They're really popular. But who do we pair them up with? Oh, we got comedian Jeff Altman. Boom, Money in the Bank. And I love Jeff Altman.
But
what the hell?
But anyway, to that point.
And action.
And it might be hard to believe now, but there was once a time when there weren't so many zombies. Before our beloved Uncle George unleashed his flesh and brain-eating menaces on the world to take over absolutely everything, zombies were actually a pretty rare sight in movies and virtually never on television. They were just kind of some random creepy thing that got dragged out whenever audiences had really had enough of the constant stream of Draculas and Wolfmen and Frankenstein monsters. And zombies really lacked that long, rich literary and film tradition that those other monsters had. Like vampire stories go back to the early 1700s. But zombies, maybe 1915 at best. Nobody really knew what they were or what they were supposed to be. We knew they came from the Caribbean islands. They didn't move around a lot. Didn't have much to say. They were an empty box in the graveyard, ready to be filled with our own ideas, our own fears. What is a zombie? How do we know? Maybe, like an anthropologist or documentary filmmaker from the past, you'll make your own trip to the islands and see for yourself. Maybe that zombie will be hanging around in the sugarcane fields, just waiting and watching. Maybe the zombie will be drifting aimlessly through life, moving from one drink to the next in search of oblivion. Maybe it'll be shut off from its own life entirely, unable to connect with anyone else, and unable to see anything outside of its own world of death and misery. Maybe that zombie just lies in bed all day, sleepwalking once in a while, to lead you out into the cane, and out into the darkness. Should you go? After all, as any islander will tell you, you shouldn't be afraid of getting attacked by a zombie. You should be afraid of becoming one. Who's ready to go walking? It's I Walked with a Zombie. Welcome to the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour. We are talking about Val Lewton's masterpiece, I Walked with a Zombie. One of many, actually, he put out in a very short period of time through the 1940s. Katie, was this your first visit to this movie, or had you seen it before?
I've seen it numerous times before. I really like Val Lewton.
I think we all have. I think
Mhm.
we've all seen this one a lot. It's just one of those you can watch on repeat and catch something different every time you see it.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't lose anything on multiple watches either. It always holds up.
Nathan, your first time seeing this movie?
Yeah, I
You're full of
never
shit.
knew.
Absolutely
who
full
Val-
of shit.
Damn
Nathan,
it.
you own lots of box sets. Do you own that Val Lewton box set that was released like 15 years ago? It's a DVD one.
Yeah.
That's what
That's
I
the
have.
same one I have, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't think
Yeah.
there's been any other ones, have there?
I wasn't sure because this one was DVD, so I wouldn't have been surprised had there been a Blu-ray one.
I'm trying to think. Has Criterion done any of his?
Mm-mm.
Is there a
think so.
collection?
Nope, it looks like
Mm-mm.
this is the only one that exists.
That's astonishing.
There's got to
think
be
about.
foreign, like Blu-rays,
There has to be. I would be really surprised
especially
if there
cat
wasn't.
people.
Yeah.
you
I'm
know.
sure there's like individual releases of certain things. Like Blu-ray, I meant, not just in general.
I think there is a Criterion release of Cat People, but I'm not 100% on that.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
There is a Criterion of Cat People.
Is Curse of the Cat People on that as an extra?
As an
or-
extra, probably, yeah.
I don't know. Let me look.
So, in case anyone is unaware, Val Lewton was one of those guys that did novelizations of movies early in his career. He got a job, I believe, working as assistant cameraman or second cameraman on Gone with the Wind. I'm not real familiar with his background.
Yeah.
And parlayed that into a job with RKO. He got put in charge of their horror movie division in 1942. Now, I was not aware RKO had a horror movie division, per se,
It makes
because
sense.
they did
No,
not
well,
put
that
out a
was-
lot of horror movies.
No, this
leading
is
up to
about
that.
it. I mean, unless you want to throw the King Kong films in there, which are just kind of monster movies. But yeah, they weren't known for it. And when you watch his films, afterward you go, they still aren't really known for it because
Yeah.
they're not atypical horror pictures at all.
No. Well, his only directives from the studio was, we're going to give you a $150,000 budget. You get 75 minutes running time tops, and we give you a title. Go make a movie. And that was it. He was on his own to do
Yeah.
whatever he wanted to do, really. So maybe
Well, he had very limited budget too to work
that
with.
is
That's
true. Even
yeah,
in
that's why
1942,
a lot of these are
$150,000
more
was not much. Yeah.
psychological. Yeah.
So I forget what the budget on The Thin Man was, which would have been made right around this time. We talked about this on another episode, but it wasn't a whole lot more than this, but definitely was more. I Walked with a Zombie was put out in April of 1943, and I think about the timing of when this was done, because The Cat People was still in editing when this was being shot. And I think that's important, because if The Cat People had come out already by the time they started working on this, it might have ended up being a very different movie. Because The Cat People was a phenomenal success. It was gigantic. And if that had happened first, I think the studio might have pushed to have more stars in the next one,
Yeah.
might have had more of a hand in it. Because his later movies did have more, I wouldn't say
Star
A-listers
power.
necessarily A-listers, but they didn't have complete unknowns in the way that this movie did. I mean, Frances Dee was not necessarily a well-known actress. Tom Conway was in a lot of stuff, but not, a high wattage star. And
He was a RKO contract player too.
James Ellison was too, I think, wasn't he?
I think so, yeah.
I think so, yeah. And you could be forgiven for not recognizing James Ellison, who played Wesley in this film. He was in a whole bunch of very forgettable Westerns. Even real diehard film fans don't really recognize him from anything else other than this movie. I mean, Christine Gordon as Jessica, she was in a couple of things. I mean, this was sadly as close as she ever got to a speaking role in a movie. So I Walked with a Zombie. Darby Jones was in a few things, but, you didn't have your Boris Karloff or Bela Lugosi like they did later on with, what was it?
Well,
Body
Teresa
Snatcher.
Harris had quite a few projects under her wing by the time.
She was in,
she did this
by
one.
my count, she was in 103 movies.
Yeah, she may have
Throughout
been
the
the one with
40s?
the most amount of credits. I'm not certain, but yeah, and she'd already done a couple of voodoo
Mhm.
type movies up to this point. and was also just previously in Cat People prior to this.
So how was the reception of this film at the time?
Terrible.
Oh.
w-
So it
well,
didn't garner its popularity until later.
It was a very slow burn. It played in theaters for a year, but it took a bit to catch on. Well, you have to remember, this was a movie that took everything you knew about, what little you knew about zombies, and certainly a lot of things you knew about horror movies, and just threw it out and went its own way.
True.
It was marketed as a horror movie, but it doesn't really feel like one necessarily.
I mean, I feel like it feels like horror for that time, if that makes sense. Because
even
yeah,
then,
true.
like,
Yeah,
I think of White Zombie immediately.
White Zombie would be really
And
the first zombie movie that we know of.
And I like that
Right.
one too.
And they cover a lot of the same material in this film, although it's more of an isolated incident and it's more of a character drama than anything.
It's I Walked with a Zombie is, to me, is more of a movie about grief
Yeah.
than anything else.
Guilt, how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or don't.
True.
In a way. Well, this also goes back to what zombie movies even were, which was almost nothing. No, there was no such thing as a quote-unquote zombie movie in 1943. Not really. I mean, what would you be talking about? If somebody told you it's a zombie movie, what would you think about, except for White Zombie?
Well, there was also the sequel to White Zombie, Revolt of the Zombies, and then King of the Zombies. But like I mentioned, Teresa Harris had done, well, it's more voodoo, but I mean, I'd say they're not zombie movies per se versus voodoo, maybe. You know what I mean? Like,
so it kind of maybe could even be its own genre. Or not subgenre, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of these types of films, especially after this film. You know, you're going all the way to like I Eat Your Skin, and then you go even further with the, Romero changing the game.
Yes.
And then Lucio Fulci kind of
Fulci,
melding both of
yeah.
those with Zombie. And it's voodoo, but it's also Romero zombies together. But yeah, this is I remember being really disappointed with it when I first saw it as a kid, because you're like
expecting something,
movie, and rented the old Nostalgia Merchant VHS, back in the day, which if I recall was loaded with awesome trailers at the end, probably King Kong on there for sure. But yeah, and then you come back to it and you go, okay, well, it's more, once you know what you're going into, I think it bears repeat viewings in that regard. Like, you can't just watch it once, and I mean, you can if you don't like it and just want to move on, but I mean, there's more to it than, oh, this isn't really a horror thriller necessarily. I never see it as that.
I definitely think it deserves its place in the zeitgeist of horror. And maybe that's just because I really like Val Lewton stuff that I feel that way. But I feel like it's a somewhat, I don't want to say pivotal film, but I feel like it deserves its place.
Now, Val Lewton is not credited as a writer on this film, but he did have final say over the final draft that went to shoot. So he did have a lot of control over what was going on with these things.
Well, isn't that because that's typically a producer's place in it? I have found more and more, like, as I've learned more about film and all that, your producers have more pull than just giving the money to the project. To an extent.
True.
To an extent.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to make, like, major decisions or anything like that, but they still have more pull than just funding.
Well, I mean, the people who do have writing credits on this were also writers on stuff like The Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, Invisible Man Returns,
Kurt Siodmak, yeah.
Yeah. Leopard Man and Isle of the Dead later on for Lewton. So they certainly had some street cred. But yeah, he did have final say over it, and it was truly what he wanted to put on screen. No one was going to tell him no, because the studio just said, go make a movie. We don't care. Just get it out on time and on budget.
And he wasn't dealing with really high stakes financially either.
Not at all.
So yeah, he was just on par to deliver a product by a certain point and, pull it off well.
It is kind of sad to me that he didn't go on for very long. I mean, all the movies he released through RKO were released within 3 years. I mean, Cat People was late 1942. I Walked with a Zombie in 43. Leopard Man, Seventh Victim, and Ghost Ship were all 43. One called Mademoiselle Fifi, which I've never seen. I don't know what it's about. But Curse of the Cat People, all the way through Bedlam, were down to 1946, and then it was over. By
When
then,
did he
RKO was
pass
completely
away?
falling. Not long after that, he was not a healthy guy. And that, coupled with the fact that RKO was dissolving, and it headed down a very long, slow path toward oblivion, which sadly left a lot of their contract players like Tom Conway just kind of out on their ass having to find their own work. And a lot of these guys never recovered.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people don't think about that. And it's not like the projects aren't coming their way because of their talent. It's because they were under contract and they were dependent on the work from the studio. Yeah.
Yeah, you show up on a Monday. What movie am I doing this week? What 2 movies might I be doing this week? And then that's all over. What do you do? You have to fend for yourself out there, and you're not known for anything in particular.
Especially if you're a character actor.
Yeah.
That's really difficult, in that era in particular.
I mean, he did the Falcon series after this. I'm talking about Tom Conway specifically. So he had some success, but a lot of the others, not so much. Jacques Tourneur, I think, went on to direct movies for other studios. He had a long career after this, but a lot of
I'm on a bit of a Vincent Price kick, and he did one of my favorites, The Comedy of Terrors, which most people don't even realize that's him directing, but they think it's, Roger Corman, because you've got Basil Rathbone, you've got Boris Karloff, Peter Lorre, and Vincent Price. So it's all that whole Raven, Tales of Terror crowd.
I would have guessed Roger Corman too on that one. That seems like exactly the thing he would have reserved for himself to direct. Yeah.
I don't know the situation on when he did those, if he was more of a gun for hire in those days, or, I mean, obviously he had worked with Karloff and, before and all that. So it's underrated. It's a good one.
Speaking to the writing, Lewton and the team he had working on this did everything they could to make sure that their portrayals were accurate. They did extensive research into voodoo or voodoo to try to make sure that they weren't portraying anything unrealistically, or, you know what I'm saying? They wanted to make it right.
Necessarily
very respectful. Yeah.
That's definitely clear in the film.
It is, but the source material they had to work with was not the greatest at the time. I don't know for sure, but the text they probably relied on the most would have been a book by William Seabrook called The Magic Island. It was written in 1915 or 1916, around the first years of the American occupation of Haiti, when the Haitian American Sugar Company was established. This is kind of the company structure that was portrayed in White Zombie. Seabrook himself was friends with Aleister Crowley and reportedly had a strong leaning toward bizarre sexual encounters, whatever that meant in 1915. I have no idea. So, I mean, this is an American who came in with an occupation force, who is going into Haiti and asking everybody what zombies are. They were very unlikely to be upfront with him. Haitians do not initiate outsiders. Well, they do. I'll get to that in a minute. But you're asking these people to divulge to you their biggest secrets, their deepest fears, and to tell someone who is occupying their country about all this. They just started making stuff up, as far as I can tell, just to get him away. They would say things like, if you see a horse with 3 legs, that's a zombie. Or, if you see a man talking to a cat, that's a zombie. And he would dutifully write all this down. He sensationalized a little bit to make for a better book, and that was the text. That was the definitive text about voodoo until a couple of years after this movie came out. And someone you should all get to know, Maya Deren, wrote this lovely text, Divine Horsemen, the Living Gods of Haiti. If you don't know who Maya Deren is, she was an experimental filmmaker, one of the founders of the Cinema 16 movement in New York, most well known for films like Atland or Meshes of the Afternoon. And
she did Outland?
Atland is what it's called. If she had done Outland, I'd be more than a little bit surprised. But she went down to Haiti to shoot film of some dance routines to incorporate into one of her other films, and ended up spending 18 months there. She actually got initiated into voodoo. And like I said, it's very, very unusual for Haitians to initiate non-Haitians. I suspect it's absolutely unique for that non-Haitian to be a Ukrainian Jewish woman from New York, but that's what happened.
And what was her name
And
again? I'm sorry.
Maya Duran, she
Maya Duran.
is a remarkable figure and well worth researching all on her own. And this book is considered the definitive text on the subject, even by other anthropologists and Joseph Campbell and the like. Not to say that Hollywood would have given a shit about making sure everything was accurate, but still, they did what they could. And everything they present in this movie was done completely in earnest and without any intention to sensationalize or make something into what it isn't. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
it
saying?
definitely doesn't seem like it is going out of its way to be offensive or anything like that.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
not
very
exploitation.
straightforward and not pseudo. It is very respectable of what it's portraying.
I would even argue they don't go far enough with it, because I think there's a. I don't want to be sacrilegious because I'm not the hugest fan of this film compared to his other productions. But I feel like there's some lost potential.
Yeah, it's very
in
surface
in a
level.
lot of that.
But I wonder if that is because they didn't know enough about it, that he didn't want it to be portrayed
Well, also, the voodoo isn't the point.
Possibly.
I mean, the voodoo isn't the point of the film itself.
Right.
It's not like we're making the believers. That was an eye roll for those of you who didn't hear that coming through the microphone. Damballa gets mentioned, who actually, there is a Damballa, is the Rada tradition of the Serpent in the Rainbow. Carrefour is a Loa that governs the crossroads, the place between life and death. He holds back the demons, but is capable of releasing them too, so don't piss him off. So there are elements there that make sense. It's just, like I said, it's not all there because they didn't have all the information they could have. And again, I don't know how much it would have mattered anyway. I mean, we're making a movie here, so, you gotta...
But would you rather watch something that is bare minimum surface level because they don't know enough about it, or watch them just portray it all completely incorrectly?
I guess I can appreciate that they didn't talk out of school in this movie. They didn't put stuff in there that they know they didn't know. There are some of the ritual routines portrayed, but it's done not in any way that, say, in Live and Let Die or something like that, where it's clearly over the top and out there kind of a situation.
Yeah, it's very tasteful.
Yes, that's a good word for it, I think.
It is.
And what I'm saying is, like, the expectancy, what I guess I would have wanted, maybe not elaborating on the lore, whether they knew more about it or not, but what I want would actually probably not be respectful, because I kind of feel as if, like, revisiting this again, there's a lot of potential for, because you're dealing with the unknown, so there's a lot of potential for, like, mood and dread.
I get that.
But I don't know that you want to go the dreadful route, because then you're getting into disrespectful territory, Because
it doesn't necessarily mean just because it is portraying voodoo, it doesn't have to be dreadful. And at the time, considering this was on the cusp of something new, by portraying it in a more dreadful, potentially negative way, that could have set the precedence. Especially had it been a more popular film, for how voodoo would have been not portrayed, but received and all of that.
I think there were plenty of other movies going that route that
that's
didn't
true.
have to do it himself,
And that may have also been why Mantan Moreland wasn't in this. No, I'm kidding.
Is that laugh?
But no, you're right. It was, they go their own way with it, and it's almost like, I always compare it to White Zombie, because I feel like that's a similar.
That one was really good.
Plot, in terms of the bride being, possessed, or going into that whole, what you would describe it, a state, I suppose. But but anyway, that very much is a horror film.
Yeah,
I don't ever. I mean, it's a thriller, I guess, more than anything. But I wouldn't do a double bill with those two movies, because I think in a way they're almost polar opposite, even though they're dealing with the same type of material.
Would
really.
you? No, go ahead, Katie.
I was gonna say the only way I would ever see that as a potential double bill is you're
Shockma.
talking about what set the precedence, like what started out zombie films.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they are the
Like an
2
exploration.
first of their kind, really.
There had been a lot of stage productions of different zombie stories. White Zombie was easily the first Hollywood film to deal with the subject as it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this one. And there, like I said, there weren't a lot of these movies. There just weren't.
And there's big gaps too, because then you jump to like Zombies of Morotau and stuff like that came later. So it wasn't like every year you'd have a new zombie movie. You know?
Now you do.
Yeah, you have more than
Well,
one.
my question is, so other than Night of the Living Dead in 1968, what was the first one to really make what we know zombies as now? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Oof. Was there another one?
I think with...
I don't know. Like, everything
know.
I'm thinking of came after Night of the Living Dead because I
Yeah.
think of Burial Ground and I think of...
oh, God, don't.
I like Burial Ground, but that was in the 70s.
If you love maggots...
I do love maggots.
I mean,
that sounded weird. You know what I mean?
There was Tom Conway in Voodoo Woman that came before that, but it's not really... It
But I'm
didn't come
saying...
close.
But that wouldn't even be what zombies are now.
Well, I would argue I Am Legend is a big part of the lore that you end up getting.
Well,
And
so
before
that was
the
the last
very
man on
first-
Earth, right?
You're talking about Ellison's...
So that's the first...
Ellison's novel.
Hmm?
You're talking about the
Well,
novel.
I was thinking of the
Richard
film,
Matheson.
the
I Am
64
Legend.
movie.
Richard Matheson.
The
Richard
book.
Matheson, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like the first version is the 1964 Vincent Price film,
Yeah,
The Last Man on Earth. But in that, it's still, are they undead? Are they zombies? Are they vampires?
True.
And they're not flesh eaters.
Yeah,
but
kinda...
it's, yeah, they're in the...
It's going to be that undead type of creature.
They're not... I think they're zombies.
I've always heard people
Whereas
say they're vampires.
In the Mega Man, I think they're vampires.
I think of them as vampires myself in the Price version, yeah. And even the Omega Man. Even the Omega Man, I think.
Well,
of them as
Omega Man
vampires.
was
that's
Heston,
more
right?
overt.
Wasn't Charlton Heston in that?
Yeah, and Anthony Zerbe.
He definitely was.
He's the head of the vampires. Yeah. And he goes to see Woodstock.
Yeah.
Well, I've never seen any
I
of the adaptations of that movie, so I'm just trying to keep them all clear.
Well,
I will warn you: the early versions of that whether you watch Last Man on Earth or the Omega Man, you might be disappointed that there's not any footage of Shrek.
What?
Anyway,
am I supposed to get this?
In the Will Smith version, it's like, why do we have Shrek in here?
Oh, okay. I've never seen it either, so I've never seen any adaptation of the book.
They're watching Shrek on TV. Is what I'm saying. It takes you out of it.
I was really wondering what Shrek was doing.
I kind of think the Will Smith version comes closer to the source material than they've ever gotten, but then misses it completely.
Somewhat. Oh, yeah, they all come very close, but they all miss the mark.
So is the book worth my time?
Yes.
Oh,
definitely.
Yes. Okay.
And it was very much an inspiration for Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a good jumping off point.
Much like Val Lewton did with this movie, Romero took zombies and tossed out everything you knew about them in the past and started completely over again from ground zero. I don't know.
Although they weren't technically zombies in his films.
Especially in the first one.
They're just walking dead. They're undead creatures.
Yes.
We don't know.
Somebody needs to do that again. I don't know who can do it at this point. We need a break from zombies for a while, probably, just to take a breath. And then I think we can start over. We can come up with something else.
Well, that's a good point because we haven't really gone back to the source material. I mean, I could be missing stuff, but I feel like you don't have the Haitian zombies in film today, do we?
Not that I,
No.
not really.
Not really.
I'm sure there's some random sci-fi film that I haven't seen.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
The closest we may have gotten was Wes Craven's Serpent in the Rainbow.
I love that movie.
Yeah,
probably. So good.
But that's more. That's just to me. That's just a movie about voodoo.
Yeah, it's not necessarily.
I don't look at it as a zombie.
That movie, like this one, is based on kind of sus source material. I mean, Wade Davis went down there to find the powder. It was purely a pharmaceutical visit and not much to do with understanding voodoo at all.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't really explore that, and it was kind of taken to mean something that it wasn't, I think. I don't blame Wade Davis at all. I mean, what he did what he did. But Serpent of the Rainbow easily is, I can't think of anything else that even approaches that.
Well, you have okay,
direction
so
of
like
it.
there's the Skeleton Key. Is that movie with Kate Hudson?
Hudson.
Oh,
Yeah,
Kate
because
Hudson, yeah.
it's based on
It's kind of
it's
been more of
set
a Santeria thing.
yeah.
And they
Well, it's
played up
set
the
in
red brick dust
Louisiana and
thing
all
way
that,
too
New
much.
Orleans. I've never seen it. I just know that one
I
is
mean, there's
kind of
yeah,
dabbling
there.
in
I mean,
that.
there's a lot of films about voodoo per se.
Yeah, but I don't think we're gonna get
but
the
we don't.
over arc between it and
Right.
I mean,
zombies anymore.
if you wanted to, you could throw Angel Heart into that mix also. But
I
it
wanna
doesn't
see
have anything
that.
to do with zombies.
Yeah,
I think it's
for sure.
because like we now know that it isn't. There's no correlation, so people tend to keep it separate instead of
I tend to think that the Haitian voodoo zombie thing might be actually really difficult to adapt because it is
so unknown.
Such a different system of thinking about things. To adapt it into a predominantly Judeo-Christian society and the movies they make would be very difficult. It's sort of like when, Western writers try to transcribe African music onto sheet music, and they can't do it because it doesn't follow those rules.
Oh, yeah.
That notation doesn't work. It's the same kind of thing. Haitian voodoo does not translate one-to-one to anything else.
Mm-mm.
And you also want to be very careful of how you do it too. I mean, you want to.
Oh, there was I'm totally interrupting. I'm sorry. There was a movie that came out in 2019 called Zombie Child that was supposedly phenomenal, and it's about Haitian voodoo.
I have not heard of this.
I've heard it is absolutely amazing. I totally forgot about that one until right now.
2019. I'll have to write that down.
ZOMBI, Child.
So it's a child that watched the
No.
Fulci movie.
Oh, no. It says a man is
grew up
brought back
loving
from
it.
the dead to work the hell of
That's-
sugarcane plantations.
Ah.
It sounds really good. I've heard it's amazing. It was really big in the festival circuit that year. I'm sorry, I totally interrupted.
That's okay.
No, that's exactly what we're talking about.
And it's very relevant. It touches on even the sugar plantation or the sugarcane plantations and everything.
Well, speaking to that, the setting of this movie, I Walked with a Zombie, I don't know if it's necessarily a plantation. At the time that it was being made, there probably weren't any plantations left. It was very corporate. However, I will say the attention to detail that they did to those sets is absolutely phenomenal.
It's a beautiful film.
The art direction is amazing. And I really liked how at the beginning we get that overview of the house with no one in it, almost like it's foreshadowing how many people are not going to be around by the end of this movie.
Yeah.
It's a very nice touch.
Yeah.
But it looks gorgeous. I think it was, I don't know where it was shot.
It was mostly sound stages. Yeah, like all the fields and, of course, where they have the ceremony and all that. That was on a soundstage.
Yeah, they got every nickel of that $150,000 budget, for sure.
Yeah. It has some really beautiful cinematography as far as like tracking shots too.
Oh yeah.
When they're
through the fields and
middle
everything.
of the night. Yes, it's just amazing.
I kind of agree with what you were saying earlier though about how it's not necessarily a horror film. Like there are horrifying elements to it, but does that make a horror film? Like I don't know.
And that's also, I think, maybe because RKO gave him that title and they said, make this movie, Val Lewton. And he was not fond of the title because it's so exploitation like vibe to it. And it's
not.
How do you...
Yeah.
So it's almost like he was kind of doing the antithesis of that. Like, here's your expectation.
Yeah.
But this is the movie I'm making. I don't think it's an awful title at all. It's a great title actually, but it is not befitting of the source at all. Like
it does make me wonder what he would have done with I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
I think
Yeah.
the reason this
Very
Where I
title
was a teenage zombie. Yeah.
I think the reason this title works well for this film is because of when it came out. Because there wasn't any precedent for zombies yet.
That's true.
Had a
Like, you
movie
wanna
come
put it
out
right in the
now
title.
and you
Yeah.
called it this and there was no zombie, people would be like, "What the hell?"
Hmm.
You know? But back then, we didn't really have zombie films yet, so it is
And whenever you did, the name the word zombies in the title
Mhm.
practically every
But
time.
wasn't that common for those types of films back then? Like, you would have like, I'm just throwing this title out there. I could be completely wrong, but you have, like, The Lizard in the Woman's Skin,
Hmm.
Yeah.
where you just have or any Argento film, where you've got, like, the cat people not cat people, what do you Cat of Nine Tails, or,
Mhm.
Bird with the Crystal Plumage, and you've got these outlandish titles,
Hmm.
but it's not really in the movie. You know what I
I
mean?
get you. Yeah. It was a bit more
Yeah,
literal
Mhm.
for this
right,
one, yeah.
right. Well, that's why I cringe every time I see this film, because the opening line is, "I walked with a zombie," and you're like, you just shoehorn that in there
Yeah.
just to, like, tie it in, and it's yeah, but I mean, it ends up becoming, you know.
Welcome to the Isle of the Dead, everybody. They didn't do that.
Or the body snatcher in me. We
Hey.
went over to the pub after we, took care of that latest corpse. Yeah, that's
So, what do we think happened to Jessica? They hint around at a lot of things. I have
well,
my own
whatever it is
ideas.
doesn't get resolved.
Mm.
So it's meant to be ambiguous, and it ends in that
It
way.
isn't. It isn't. I mean, we have that scene toward the end where everybody is standing around blaming themselves for what happened to her. It's like, I pushed her away. No, it was my fault because I took her to the home for the doctor, who is, I think we could all agree is a terrible doctor. Does his line about how it is a fever with a long Latin name, but they never really get to it. And I got to thinking about that, and I remember, this was done during the height of the production code, so they couldn't say everything they wanted to say. They hint around that she was a wicked woman, brought shame on the family. Something happened. She got sick. Then they took her to the home for to try to cure her. What are they getting at here? Because it kind of sounds like they're hinting around at a venereal disease a little bit.
Oh wow, I wouldn't have gone there.
I mean, we are
but
led to believe that there was unfaithfulness there. At least that's how
Yes.
I've
yeah,
always
there's a
perceived that. Yeah.
triangle there.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it would make like especially in the 40s, right? 43.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it meaning like I like Jason's take on it being a
I don't
possible
know.
venereal
Yeah.
disease type thing,
Metaphor. Yeah.
especially like syphilis. That'll jelly your brain. Like, and there is the talk of her clearly not being mentally well. So it could very much be something of that nature. I like that. Oh, I never thought of it
I
that
don't
way. I
know.
really like that.
I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not saying that's the correct answer here by
Right,
any
but
means,
it is
but
an
it just
interesting perception of it.
the fact that I know they keep hinting around at it to keep it ambiguous and keep the audience
Mhm.
guessing,
Well, and the
but
song in it,
everything
like
else is
Yeah,
pointing
that
you in a
pretty much
different
tells the
direction
tale.
here. Oh, Sir Lancelot, easily the most threatening tiny man with a guitar I think I've ever seen in a movie. The way he just kind of skulks out of the darkness to sing his little song, and
I love that
Yeah.
song.
it's a treasure.
I also love the bit where he's like, "Had I known you were here with a woman, I wouldn't have sang it." And it's like, well, why just not sing it anyway? Like, I love the concept of, I wouldn't do it in front of this. Like,
Oh, no, the Islanders clearly hate these people. Well, the Stone Cold Passion, they seem to hate these people a lot.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it makes sense.
I was thinking about her condition, and I never really made the parallel before. But I know Romero loves Val Lewton, right?
Mm.
But do we think the Judith O'Dea character in Night of the Living Dead, who pretty much goes catatonic,
Yeah, I could see
is
that.
that almost an homage
Possibly.
Could be.
to the state where she's kind of another type of zombie
Yeah.
for the rest of the movie?
Yeah. More
I
of
don't
your
know.
like literal and then your figurative zombies. Because she does pretty much check out from the
Yeah.
second.
And she just says nonsensical shit throughout. It's hot. It's hot in here. It's so hot.
God, now I want to rewatch Night of
Dwayne
the
Jones
Living
is like,
Dead.
what the fuck do you care about the heat? We got undead people battering at our
I
doors
know.
trying to kill us.
God, I love
Finally,
him.
Eat our
finally
flesh.
she speaks, and I just want her to shut the hell back up again. Oh my
Yep.
god.
Yeah.
But honestly, couldn't it even and we'll take it one step further. It's not necessarily being catatonic, but there is a little bit with and I drew a blank on her name. But the woman character in Dawn of the Dead, with her being pregnant and all. You have this
Oh.
whole
Okay.
like
Galen Ross character.
yeah, because let's take it even a step further with what you were saying with it being a potential venereal disease. It could even be pregnancy because she was in this love triangle. And you know what I mean?
Okay.
It's just you have these I don't want to say
Hmm.
stereotype of women's characters, but you have the them being the root of the issue for whatever it
Right.
is. Cuz I know Dawn of the Dead is about so much more than her character being pregnant, but it is a talking point in the film.
Yeah.
Even down to the talk of abortion and
Mm-hmm.
her being the root of a potential issue in this bigger event going on.
Was Jessica possibly pregnant at some point, and
Something happened,
something
and
happened?
yeah,
I don't know.
An abortion
That's
gone awry.
possibly.
That's a good as theory as any.
Especially like you're not gonna just out and out say that in a film that came
No.
out in
Oh, no.
43.
No.
Exactly.
You
So
couldn't
you
even
have
use the word
this
pregnant.
right.
Yeah, right. Couldn't give it a he couldn't get a
There's no
toilet
way.
on screen
No.
back then. So yeah.
That's interesting. Now I want to rewatch it with this thought in my head.
You know what you're saying about Dawn of the Dead, and I know this is going to segue elsewhere, but one of the things I always credit him, with that character, because when you find out she's pregnant, typically, stereotypically of films of that nature, or not necessarily films of that, but they always introduce the plot point of, oh, she's pregnant. So that means she's going to have the baby.
Which the remake did
And
do.
exactly.
Yeah.
They went a little fucking
Pretty
wacky with
dramatically.
the shit. But yeah, so but it never happens.
Mm-mm.
And in fact, she's such a pivotal character. He teaches her how to fly because he knows, he fucking knows he's not going to make it through this. And she's going to be the saving grace to
Oh
whomever's
yeah,
still around.
she definitely is more uplifted as a female character than sometimes, especially in horror, they are kind of put on the back burner. I like that even with the like you said, because usually they'll show the pregnancy and then the birth, blah blah blah. With her character, she is more uplifted to being a bigger part of the film than just, Does that make
And
sense? Yeah.
counteracting the Judith O'Dea performance, whereas he probably got criticism for that and thought, because that's not the type of person he was anyway.
I know, but don't we
So-
get kind of the badass woman character in Karen's mom? I feel because doesn't she kind of have backlash to her husband with all of that? Yeah.
she's Marilyn Eastman is great in that. Yeah. Carl Hardman, she tells him,
Yeah.
there's a radio upstairs, like, you dumb fuck. You got us down here. I mean, yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
I never knew that George Romero was a big Val Lewton fan, so a lot of stuff makes sense now.
Well, I mean, he's just in general, though. I mean, I know that, yeah.
But knowing that and
just-
then watching films, you can definitely now see, or I can see the influences there.
Well, practically all the filmmakers of his generation that do those types of films, or just in general, were influenced by the works of Val Lewton, I'd imagine. And also they're, the typical monster kids too of the Universal fare. But you're looking at two ends of the spectrum here, where you have this type of horror that's very much literal, in your face, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. And then you have this where it's ominous, and you think the Leopard Man is about somebody who turns into a leopard.
It's not about a guy.
And it's not the Puma Man either.
Right.
But
And that was kind
Puma
of going
Man.
to what I said earlier.
Yeah.
How you have these titles that make you think it's going to be about something else, and then it's more
Now,
metaphorical than actual
not
literal.
that they weren't marketed
Right.
in a
No.
way that exploits that. And in fact, to the, probably dismay of most people that saw these films would
I
get
don't know.
disappointed at the time.
Well, speaking to the marketing, I mean, I know it was marketed as a horror film, but they had to like get this into theaters and hope it worked and get it out as quickly as possible. We think there's a lot of movies getting released now. RKO, by my count alone, in 1943 released something like 55 movies.
Shit.
Universal put out 60, and this is
So they
not
were
just
Marvel before Marvel happened.
this is not just movies. They had to put out newsreels, cartoons, a 2-reeler short that went with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
it was a machine at work here. The 5 major
But also
studios
there wasn't television at the time.
right.
Yet, so
Well, I mean, the 5 major studios alone this is even without the Poverty Row guys, the 5 major studios must have put out something like 360, 370 movies a year from 1940 to 45 or so. It's just a staggering amount of stuff.
Well, yeah, and the same thing with Monogram, like you said, the Poverty Row types, the Monogram and PRC, man, their output was incredible as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then you throw in Republic with doing serials on
Yep.
top of feature films. I mean, those are your short subjects at the theater too.
If my timeline was right, by 43, RKO, like all the other studios, owned its own chain of theaters. Or was that breakup happened before? I think it was after.
I didn't realize that was a commonality back then.
No, this was
that production studios would have their own theaters.
Yeah, it was vertical integration. They owned the studios they released the films to. So they had to keep feeding the beast, so to speak. They had to keep a line of fresh stuff coming into this, which is why you had something like I Walked with a Zombie released, and then 3 weeks later, Leopard Man was released. I can't imagine putting out that much material. Maybe that's why there wasn't a lot of oversight on what Lewton was doing, because they just didn't have time. Put this thing together, get it out the door.
And they knew he could be trusted with what he did.
And I feel like they, RKO in particular, was like just disenchanted with their relationship with Orson Welles because they kind of let him do what he wanted, but it was almost sinking the ship.
Yeah.
To the point where they were acting quick to get product churned out, probably to make back their money. But yeah, so I think Val Lewton he already had street cred going into it in relationship with RKO. So I think he was trusted to deliver quality product on time and on budget, and you wouldn't have to worry about it.
I have a question. Do you think if this film came out now, like something of this style, would it be considered that elevated horror nowadays?
I think so.
Because I feel like we've gotten more horror films like this style lately than, you know what I mean? Like ones that aren't necessarily gory or violent or showing of that kind of stuff.
You mentioned The Skeleton Key earlier, and that was marketed as a return to psychological horror.
Yeah.
Whether it was or not,
I've never seen it. I've heard it's really good, though, for what it is.
But I don't know. I suppose it could be regarded that way.
Well, I feel like we have this big, I don't want to say movement, and I really do hate the term elevated horror, but you have a lot of horror now where it's like people want to basically shit on it and talk about how it's not horror because it's not bombastic or conventional or, you
gory.
know, yeah. And it's like, I don't feel that necessarily takes away from the genre just by not being exploitative of or what we're used to seeing in horror.
Right. And so a movie like The Skeleton Key, it's difficult to survive in the market if you're trying to be different about like returning to old form,
especially with horror.
Just ask the producers of The Skeleton Key how that worked out.
Or just any, like, it's almost like what I would probably consider more your indie horror, where it's not the norm or what you're used to, that it's almost people have an adverse reaction to it because it's not Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. You know what I mean?
Right, it's not what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can also take it way too far and so atmospheric that nothing actually happens. Also, you can be a little too self-conscious about it. That can happen.
That's true. Yeah.
I can see
There's
that
no
too.
happy medium. It's difficult. Yeah. Especially now.
Yeah.
It's like if you were to deliver a movie like I Walked with a Zombie now, you'd have all these notes from all the powers that be of all the changes that need to be made. It doesn't have enough. It's not horror enough. We need more horror. We need violence. We need sexuality overtly, not implied, any of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, a movie like that is definitely a product of its time. And when people say a product of its time, it usually denotes a bad thing.
Yeah.
Usually.
Well,
But
usually
I
it's
never
because
feel
it's
that
not
way.
PC or it didn't age well
But
or yeah.
that's just one
Yeah.
element of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you can only make these movies back in the 40s, the movies that Val Lewton produced. They would not have worked in the 50s, where you're dealing with, atomic
3D
scenarios and films and gimmicky stuff. You couldn't have probably, maybe in the 30s you would have been able to do them because it was leading up to that.
Yeah.
But that's about it. That's the window.
Mm.
And like you said, he did a credible amount of movies, of that, I'm going to say subgenre, because I don't necessarily think they're all horror. I don't know what they all are if you
Yeah, it's
grouped everything
definitely
together.
What is
But they,
the what is the seventh victim? It's hard. I don't know. I've watched
Thriller,
it 20 times. I still don't know who the seventh victim even is. I don't know.
And then you watch The Fourth Man afterward, and you're like, I'm totally confused. And then you're like, I got to do the Three Stooges as a palate cleanser because I'm lost.
Well, speaking of that, it's I Walked with a Zombie. Who's the zombie in this movie that she walks with, do you think?
Jessica?
There could be multiple answers to this.
Well, the one true zombie we know is Darby Jones's character,
Califor. Although I don't know if I watched this and I'm thinking, is he a zombie, or has Califor been there before anybody else on the island? He almost feels ancient in that regard, like he's just always
like that he
been
existed before.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
I don't know what he is.
He's timeless.
I mean, clearly in the opening shot, it's somebody who is not Jessica walking on the beach with somebody who is probably Betsy. I don't know.
True.
Most likely the answer is Jessica is the zombie.
I feel like it fits for a lot of people.
It could be Paul. It could be any of them.
It's intentionally vague.
Mm-hmm.
And as is the film anyway. Like, you go away from it and you're like, either you know exactly what happened or you don't know what happened. Like they give you, I don't think they give you too much information in any one scene.
Yeah.
Where you can piece everything together to a successful conclusion. And the ending, I mean,
we know she goes back to Ottawa. I'm not believing her whole romance with Paul. I think I'm not buying it, but that's just me, maybe.
Well, we need that backstory, and we don't have it. We don't know to what length those relationships were, if anything. And that also would ruin the whole movie to tell us all that anyway. So
restraint, something you don't see a lot.
That's
of
a good point
movies.
too. Like, was the shooting script this, or was there an entire prologue that was dumped because it was maybe connected too many dots for people?
I don't know.
Or I feel like it definitely could have been negatively impacted with a longer runtime, and not even because
for sure.
it not even because I think more story could hurt it. I just think it works very well with the runtime it has.
It is 1 hour and 9 minutes long.
But you know what? It's a slow burn.
It is.
So
even
they
for
have a lot of room to have that type of information.
But I feel like the slow burn works for it.
No, it does. But I'm just saying, like, they have the time to work on it if they had wanted to flesh that out further.
True.
Clearly they didn't.
Yeah.
I
feel like more info could have hurt
people.
But yeah, that again, you can't make that movie today because you can't have loose ends anymore. Practically any time.
You have to be a very big name director who is capable of calling their own shots. I'm thinking of Coen Brothers. I'm thinking David Lynch. You have to be one of those kind of guys who no one is going to say no to pull something like that.
They're not pitching the studio. The studio's begging.
You're making whatever movie you want.
Right.
You have to be able to do that to make this work. Or just have a studio like RKO that doesn't care.
I was going to say, it kind of seems like they were that way with him. here, just make this film.
Yeah,
We
'cause
don't care what it
there's
is.
either
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fire sale either way, so just go ahead and make some movies.
Of course, then once Cat People hit, he could probably do whatever he wanted to after that, because that movie was made for like, what, 120,000 and made $4.5 million or something like that.
Oh, shit.
So,
Yeah, it was
you're
a
gold.
total sleeper. Yeah. And then he had to go, oh shit, now I gotta make a sequel to that.
Which isn't really that much of a sequel.
No, but you do retain. Yeah, well, that's the thing is you have most of the cast is back, but you're like, where's this going? Okay,
I don't know.
Yeah,
And of course, the remake of Cat People is something completely different.
except for the pool scene is pretty damn on par. But yeah,
Well, you're not going to jettison the pool scene, but yeah, it's
no, that's the one
something else.
iconic scene. But that's interesting because actually now you bring that up, that's another tangent. But I love Paul Schrader's remake, but for different reasons, and kind of like Universal the next year did Scarface of Brian De Palma, which is a remake, and again it's a different movie,
very different,
and I love both films on their own merits. Same thing with Cat People, and they both have scores by Giorgio Moroder, so there you go.
True.
I love a good score.
Well, Cat People has the David Bowie song on it though, so it gets an edge up.
I don't know though. You got Take It to the Limit and Scarface. So, no, Jesus Christ, Take It to the Limit. Push It to the Limit. Jesus.
I heard the hesitation in your voice when you first started saying it.
No, not.
And I'm like, I can't have a montage in my head to that title
with the Eagles. Take It to the Limit.
Oh god damn! No.
That would have been really out of place in Scarface.
That's when I turned the movie off. You kidding? Especially you just Pacino counting money.
To the Eagles.
Take it to the limit. One more time. Like, god damn. This needs more pep. This is a montage.
It's an 80s drug money counting montage, for fuck's sake.
Got a wedding sequence in this montage? Come on.
Well, and with that, I think it's time to draw this episode to a close. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you haven't seen I Walked with a Zombie, stop everything you're doing. Go see it immediately. Check it out. It is well worth your time. Thank you all for listening. Good night.
Oh, zombie, oh, you drive me crazy when you're walking so slow. Your touch is cold, but to me it's just right. So be my zombie baby and bite me good night.
And with that, another show has come to a close. Please share it with a zombie in your circle of friends or family. They will absolutely love it, I promise. The Smooth Thrills Radio Hour is a production of Ghostcraft and is recorded live on a tropical island surrounded by death known as Dallas, Texas. Home to one of the largest native zombie communities outside of Orange County, California. Don't Google that, please. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh, zombie, oh, you drive me crazy when you're walking so slow. Your touch is cold, but to me it's just right. So be my zombie baby and bite me good night.
This has been a Ghostcraft presentation.